African Media Initiative's business blog discusses topics pertinent to media businesses on the African continent with business leaders and thought leaders to look at trends, identify opportunities, and examine possible solutions to the many challenges facing media organizations as they try to navigate today's rapidly changing media landscape. In today's discussion, Nation Media Group's business editor Wallace Kantai talks about how media business models are changing, the prospects for growth in the media industry, and the benefits of having more and better stories in the media about business and entrepreneurship.
Technology is interesting because what it's doing is changing how people collect news and changing how people disseminate news, and that's obviously going to have an impact on established media companies. In terms of how to collect news, the old model used to be that you would send out a reporter in the television business with a camera, in the print business with a notebook and possibly a stills camera, wait for them to come back, process the story, and then get it out. Now all that is changing. So in the case of breaking news, you probably have a situation where the news has already broken through technology. So in the case of an accident, a terrorist incident, a crime, and the like, people probably have taken that news and broken it out on social media, for instance. And so for a news company, a news institution, then it means that they're no longer in this business of breaking news. You have to figure out what to do with the news that you have. There's an assumption that what people call citizen journalists are not true journalists, but for the most part, things like breaking news is simply what happened, the good old classic 6 Ws. So in this case, that changes what you're actually deploying someone to do. In the case of corporate news, results from a company, in the case of new products, launches and new product announcements, changes in personnel, again, a lot of this tends to be broken through other channels. So a company may have a newsletter, a company may have a website, may have its own social media presence, and they'll probably put the news out there. So when you're going to cover it as a media institution, you need to decide, because it's not breaking news anymore, what are you actually adding value to? In the case of dissemination, the same thing. So whereas the news has been collected, like we said, through other methods, again, getting out there to the general public, whereas you may have a wider reach, you may have a more credible voice, but the fact is that other people will still put the news out there. So what value are you adding? What are you actually going to do that's going to create the difference in what you're actually doing? Yes, simple answer to that is yes, simply because you still have people who want to reach, or people or corporations that want to reach many people or corporations. So advertising is the proven method to reach them. Now, what does advertising mean? That's I think the question that should be asked, because traditional advertising is a static piece of information, and even when you have video, it's still static in the sense of it's created once, and you then take it out to a public out there. So you publish it in a newspaper, you put it on a billboard, you'd go out and put it on television, on radio, and all the other platforms that there are. Now advertising is no longer what it used to be. It's no longer that static. Sometimes advertising, it's getting to the point where advertising responds to the person who's being advertised to. Because of where we're reaching in terms of getting to know people put a lot of the information out there, you actually have advertising that's tailored to you. Now, it's not very big in Africa, but it's coming. It's right now in very crude methods, which is simple demographics. So if you're male of a certain age, of a certain predilection in terms of your preferences, of a certain race, it's still out there. And it's going to get to the point where it's all individual. And so it means when you ask whether advertising is important, of course it is. But what is advertising? And I think that question is not yet answered. It's going to be answered in the next decade or so. We have this, I think it was a movie Minority Report, where you have sort of walking through a mall and all these individualized ads are coming towards. So it's actually getting to the point where, if you think about the mobile phone, possibilities of you and your spouse walking into a shopping mall and getting 2 different sets of adverts because of your interest, because of 2 different genders. So you may have an advert coming to you that tells you that there's a great offer on sports shoes. You may get one that says there's a great offer on baby's clothes. And so that's a possibility. Now, what does that mean for media houses? It means we need to be more active. So the old days of publishing, taking advertising in at 3 p.m., publishing in the next day's paper, that's still going to be there. But it will change, and it's going to be more complementary as opposed to it replacing entirely the traditional forms of advertising. So yes, advertising is still going to be important going into the future. No, they're pretty big. If you think about the largest circulating newspaper, which is the Daily Nation, I think we're hitting 300,000 odd copies. My numbers may not be totally accurate, may not be totally correct, but 300,000, if you put that in the context of one newspaper gets read by 10 people, the numbers then go into the millions. But still, you're talking about 3 million people. Kenya has 42 million people, right? Adults may compose possibly people who are literate, maybe about half of that. And so you're talking about 20 million people. And newspaper is only reaching barely 10% of that population. It's the largest circulating newspaper. So it's huge. If you think about television, it's the same thing. Think about radio, it's the same thing. Internet, you've barely scratched the surface. So media is big. What media will be, we don't know. Or what shape it will take, or how people will interact with it, we're still not sure. But in terms of sheer numbers, there's huge possibilities for growth. And that's Kenya. Kenya is a fairly advanced media market. Think about bigger media, other media markets within the East African region, Tanzania, Rwanda, Uganda. Some of these countries have maybe one paper, one daily newspaper, sometimes even just one weekly newspaper. That's huge. Think about it from a larger perspective of the African continent. There's still the notion that newspaper markets, television markets, radio markets are individualized cities and to countries, right? Where is the space for regional newspapers, even continental newspapers, continental media institutions? That's a huge gap that needs to be filled.